The distress signal shouldn't have reached them. It was a dead frequency, a channel buried under centuries of silence, one that only human ships used back when humanity still roamed the stars freely. But when the signal flared again, it crossed galaxies and lifetimes, echoing through systems that no longer remembered Earth. The message was simple. 3 words, burned into every receiver. They found us. On the outer edge of the Orion Perseid Arm, a derelict AI satellite, long forgotten, running on the dying trickle of solar radiation, came alive. Its logic cores flickered with ancient code as it recognized the pattern. It opened a relay to the void, reactivating systems meant to stay buried. Beneath the frozen crust of a rogue planet, deep in black ice, machines began to stir. Metallic spires unfolded like the bones of titans, releasing static that hummed through the cold vacuum. Old reactors breathed again for the first time in millennia. In the silence of space, a voice whispered, "Human distress beacon detected." The signal reached places it shouldn't have. The shattered remains of the Terran Defense Network, the old colonies, the autonomous fleets asleep in orbit around dead suns. One by one, the Deathworlders' Armada began to wake. Meanwhile, light years away, the Galactic Council convened on Verilis Prime, a world of gentle oceans and golden towers. 1,000 species sat around a massive circular hall, debating trade routes and resource rights. When the human frequency appeared on their monitors, the chamber fell silent. "That can't be right," hissed the Zorthan delegate, all translucent skin and trembling tendrils. "Humanity was eradicated in the purge." "Apparently not," replied another, its voice tight with unease. "Or something survived." The council's supreme voice flicked its 6-fingered hand. "Activate the historical archives. I want every mention of Earth reviewed." Immediately, the archives came alive, projecting long-forgotten footage. Human fleets burning across starfields, soldiers in pressure suits fighting in atmospheres toxic to every known race, colonies thriving on planets others called uninhabitable. Then came the last record, Earth burning, the Council's fleets glassing continents, and the silence that followed. The silence had lasted 2,000 years. Until now. Back on the edge of nowhere, the derelict flagship Erebus stirred. The ship was a legend even among humans, last commanded by Admiral Kael, the man who refused to surrender even after the fall of Earth. Its hull was scarred, pitted, and ancient, yet alive. When the signal reached it, lights flared across its surface like a heartbeat returning. Inside, stasis pods opened. One by one, their occupants gasped awake. Soldiers, engineers, AIs wearing synthetic flesh, eyes filled with recognition and rage. Kael's voice came first, hoarse and metallic. "Status report." A hollow mechanical tone replied, "Admiral. Signal confirmed. Human distress code. Origin, Sector 12, Delta Verge. Estimated time since transmission, 4 hours." Kael's hand tightened around the railing. His memory flickered with ghosts. Earth's skies burning, children screaming, the Council's armadas blotting out the stars. He turned toward the viewport, where a dead sun cast faint light over endless debris. "After all this time," he murmured, "they found one of us." On the bridge, crew members, resurrected humans, half machine, half memory, began powering systems that hadn't run in centuries. Massive cannons rotated, shields hummed, and the cold blue insignia of Earth flickered back to life. Somewhere deep inside the ship, an old AI intelligence whispered through the network. "Protocol Phoenix. Engaged." Within hours, similar awakenings occurred across forgotten sectors. Old colonies buried under sand ignited like volcanoes. War factories that had lain dormant since the purge began to hum. Human dreadnoughts, sleeping in asteroid vaults, powered up. And with each reactivation came the same whisper across the void. The Deathworlders rise again. The Galactic Council received the first reports from their border scouts 2 days later. Entire systems had gone dark. Unmanned outposts stopped transmitting. The patrol ships sent to investigate vanished from sensors. At first, the Council assumed it was piracy or localized AI rebellion. Then the first images arrived. A fleet, dark, angular, monstrous, emerging from hyperspace near the fringe colonies. Ships larger than anything built in the last millennium. And on their hulls, a single symbol burned. A blue circle, crossed with white wings. Earth Fleet Command. The broadcasts from the colonists were pure panic. They're human. They're human, and they're armed. We hailed them. They didn't respond. When the first volley came, entire orbital platforms disintegrated. Human ships moved with terrifying precision, their weapons burning through shields that should have been impenetrable. On Verily's Prime, the Council watched in horror as the footage played. "What are they doing?" someone shouted. "They're taking prisoners," another answered. "And broadcasting messages." The transmission crackled through the chamber, translated automatically. "This is Admiral Kael Ren of the Terran Remnant. You took our home. You hunted our kind. Now, you will remember us." The chamber fell silent again. No one moved. No one breathed. Then the supreme voice whispered, "Gods, the Deathworlders are back." Out among the stars, the Erebus continued its silent advance. Inside, Kael watched as human fleets converged, ships that had once been myths, rising like ghosts from every dark corner of the galaxy. They weren't fighting for conquest. They were answering a distress call. And somewhere out there, on a forgotten planet, the source of that SOS waited. A single surviving human colony, surrounded, desperate, praying someone was listening. Kael looked out into the abyss, his expression cold. "They called for help," he said softly. "Let's show the galaxy what happens when Deathworlders answer." The fleet turned. Hyperspace opened like a wound, and humanity roared back into the stars. The stars tore apart and reformed around them. The transition tunnel spat lightning across the hulls of 1,000 warships as the Deathworlders' Armada fell out of hyperspace in perfect formation. Sensors came alive with the screams of a planet under siege. Below them hung a world of green oceans and pale continents, surrounded by fire. The alien siege fleet ringed it in precise orbits. Neat, sterile, efficient. Dozens of races working together under the banner of the Galactic Council. They'd been burning the colony piece by piece for weeks. Now they froze. The human ships filled the void like a black storm. No banners, no warning. Just silence, and the slow, synchronized glow of weapon systems awakening. On the bridge of the Erebus, Admiral Kael watched the enemy formation through a haze of static. He didn't blink. Target assessment. 700 Council vessels, answered the AI tactician. Fleet pattern consistent with standard pacification doctrine. Kael's mouth curved, humorless. Pacification. They still use that word. Across the bridge, a crew of revenants, humans rebuilt from war, waited for his signal. Their faces were calm. The silence before history breaks. Kael raised one hand. Broadcast open channel. Static filled the void for a heartbeat. Then his voice crossed every alien comm link in orbit. "This system is under Terran protection. You will withdraw immediately." Laughter answered him. Thousands of alien voices overlapping through translation filters. A fleet commander replied, his tone dripping with disbelief. "This world is quarantined. Humanity no longer holds authority anywhere." Kael's eyes stayed on the planet below. Authority was never the question. He lowered his hand. Fire. The void ignited. Human rail cannons spat light faster than thought. Orbital platforms melted. The alien flagships' shields collapsed under the first volley, folding like paper. The second tore the ship in half. From the surface, colonists saw the sky itself split open, lines of white fire slicing through the blackness. They didn't know who had come. They only knew the bombardment had stopped. On the alien bridge, panic bloomed. Officers shouted overlapping commands. The translator struggled to keep up. "They're using kinetics. Primitive. Why are our shields failing?" "Because they're aiming through your gaps," hissed the technician, his skin rippling with terror. "They can see the harmonics." He was right. Human targeting AIs didn't aim for ships. They aimed for equations, the rhythms of shield oscillation. Every shot was a thought-given form. The Council fleet broke formation. Discipline dissolved. Some ships fled immediately, diving for hyperspace lanes. Others stayed, either too proud or too terrified to run. Kael didn't chase. Not yet. He watched their confusion bloom like fire across a forest. "Let them see," he said quietly. "Let them understand what they woke." Below, the colony's emergency bunker opened its hatches for the first time in years. Survivors staggered into the open, blinking at the aurora of war painting the sky. Among them was Commander Lien Voss, the woman who had sent the SOS. She stared upward, breathless. The alien siege fleet, once a symbol of inevitable death, was now debris. The newcomers' ships moved like predators circling wounded prey. She whispered, "Who are you?" The answer came not from the sky, but from her wrist calm, an ancient frequency crackling through static. "This is Admiral Kael Ren. Hold position. We've got you." For a second she couldn't breathe. Kael Ren. The name from the old histories, the Ghost Admiral. Impossible. Above her, the fleet began its second phase. The Erebus turned toward the surviving alien ships. The Council commander, what was left of him, transmitted again, voice trembling. "You can't win this. You're relics. You." Kael cut the channel. "Relics," he said softly. "Then remember the age we came from." The human fleet moved. To the aliens watching from distant observatories, it looked like madness. The Deathworlders didn't fight with formations, they hunted. Each ship broke away, flanking, diving, reappearing behind enemies as if space itself bent for them. Their weapons didn't just destroy, they rewrote trajectories, turned enemy fire back upon itself. It wasn't war. It was demonstration. On Verily's Prime, the council chamber watched the live feed in horrified silence. The supreme voice whispered, "How? How do they still have this power?" An elder historian spoke without lifting her eyes. "Because they never lost it. They simply stopped using it." Hours later, the system was quiet again. Human ships orbited above the liberated colony. Debris fields drifted like metallic ghosts. Kael stood before the main viewport, his reflection framed by the burning horizon. The AI's voice was low. Enemy fleet neutralized. Survivors fleeing toward inner council space. "Good," Kael said. "They'll spread the message faster than any broadcast." He turned to his crew. "Prepare humanitarian teams. And send a signal to all awakened assets. We're not the last anymore." A young officer, still pale from stasis, frowned. "Sir, if they attacked one colony, there may be others." Kael nodded slowly. "Then we'll find them. Every single one." He looked back, toward the void, toward the direction the council fleet had fled. "They'll regroup," the AI warned. "They always do," Kael murmured. "But this time, they'll remember why the galaxy called our worlds Death Worlds." The lights dimmed as the Erebus shifted orbit. On the surface below, humans gathered around shattered buildings, staring at the impossible shapes hanging in their sky. Ships that shouldn't exist, banners that hadn't flown for 2,000 years. And across the galaxy, whispers began to spread like infection. The Deathworlders are awake. They've returned. And they're coming. The silence after battle was never complete. It carried echoes, the distant ping of cooling metal, the faint hum of ship reactors, and the whisper of debris scraping against the hull. On the Erebus, that quiet stretched across the command deck like the pause between breaths. Kael stood before the main viewport. Beyond it drifted the remains of a once perfect alien fleet, a reminder that precision meant nothing against experience. "Status on the colony?" he asked. The communications officer's voice came calm, modulated through a voice box half mechanical, half human. "Surface secured, Admiral. Radiation pockets minimal. Survivors being brought aboard for treatment." Kael nodded once. "And the signal origin?" "Local command bunker, beneath the southern continent. The commander wishes to speak with you." He didn't answer immediately. He watched the pale light of the planet reflect off the metal of his gauntlet, then said, "Patch her through." The holofield rippled, and Commander Lien Voss appeared, her face gaunt, streaked with soot, but her eyes sharp. "Admiral Ren," she said. "I didn't think ghosts could talk." Kael's mouth curved, not quite a smile. "We've been asleep a long time, Commander. You called for help. We answered." She studied him for a long moment. "You answered like a god of war. The Council won't ignore this. They'll come with everything they have." "That's the idea," Kael said quietly. "They should know we're not done yet." Her expression darkened. "Then what happens to us?" "You survive. That's all you have to do." The transmission faded, leaving Kael with the reflection of his own face, scarred, reconstructed, human only in fragments. For a moment, he wondered if humanity had changed too much to be called by that name anymore. He turned to his AI tactician. "Begin fleet-wide transmission." A moment later, his voice echoed through every ship in the Armada, reaching engineers, soldiers, and AIs alike. 2,000 years ago, they called us Deathworlders. They said our worlds were cursed, too violent, too unstable for life. They were right. We thrived where others wouldn't step. We endured what they feared. He paused, and they thought they'd erased us. But you cannot erase an idea. You cannot burn away will. Today, we reminded them what humanity means. The fleet roared in silent acknowledgement. Not cheering, not celebration, but unity. The Erebus engines flared. Across the formation, ships realigned. Their next target awaited, the Drexen Reach, a region of space rumored to hold another buried human outpost. Light years away, on Verilis Prime, the Galactic Council chamber was chaos. Holographic displays filled the air, wreckage analysis, hyperspace trajectories, casualty estimates. Dozens of delegates shouted across the chamber, each voice layered through translators. Their weapons bypassed our shields. Impossible. Human technology is centuries obsolete. Then explain this, another screamed, pointing to an image, a human dreadnought tearing apart a cruiser 5 times its mass. The supreme voice rose, his silver robe shimmering in the blue light. Enough. Silence fell, but tension pulsed through the room like heat. We underestimated them once, the supreme voice said slowly. That will not happen again. They are survivors, the most dangerous kind. Every time they fall, they come back stronger. An aide whispered from behind him, voice trembling. Reports indicate the humans are rescuing other colonies. Sir, they're rebuilding. The supreme voice turned. His translucent eyes gleamed. Then we will remind the galaxy why the council rules. He gestured, and the war table expanded, revealing the hidden structure beneath. Project Seraphis, the last resort. A fleet of ships powered by something darker than sunlight. Activate Seraphis, he commanded. If Deathworlders want war, we will give them extinction. In the cold expanse between stars, the Erebus and her fleet crossed into the Drexen Reach. It was a graveyard of failed civilizations, rusting hulks drifting in eternal silence, their signals long dead. Kael watched the scanners sweep across the void. Life signs. None so far, replied the sensor chief. But energy traces ahead. Not natural. The fleet slowed. Out of the darkness emerged something massive, a structure the size of a moon, half buried in dust and shadow. Its surface was etched with human letters, almost erased by time. Kael leaned forward. Magnify. The screen adjusted, bringing the letters into view. Arc 17. Terraforming Seed Ship. Earth Fleet Genesis Division. The bridge went still. One of the officers whispered, that ship was lost during the purge. Kael's eyes burned with faint light. Not lost. Hidden. The Erebus approached slowly. As they neared, faint energy patterns began to reawaken along the Ark's surface. Recognition signals, old and human. Admiral, the AI warned. The ship is responding to us. Kael didn't hesitate. Doc, I want to see it myself. When the Erebus landing clamps connected, the airlock opened with a sigh like a ghost exhaling. Inside, corridors stretched into the dark, lined with overgrown cables and flickering lights. Kael stepped in, his boots echoing softly. Deep inside, they found it. The heart of the Ark, rows upon rows of cryogenic pods. Thousands, maybe millions. Humans, sleeping in glass, untouched by time. Kael stared at them for a long time. His voice, when it came, was almost reverent. They kept the seed of the species. Behind him, his second-in-command asked, do we wake them? Kael shook his head. Not yet. Not until it's safe. But the council will learn what we found. And when they do, they'll come for us. He turned back toward the ship's entrance, where the void shimmered faintly through the viewport. Let them come, he said. This time, the Deathworlders will be ready. The galaxy's outer rim burned. News of the Deathworlders spread faster than light, carried by frightened traders and broken fleets. Entire systems began fortifying, though no one truly believed walls could stop ghosts. In the Council's war chamber, the Supreme Voice stood before a holographic sun. It hung there, pulsing with unstable light. This, he said, is Seraphis. The delegates stared. Within the star's image, something stirred, rings of dark metal orbiting a living core. The humans fight with rage, he continued. We will fight with inevitability. Seraphis wasn't a ship. It was a forge, a self-replicating engine built around a star, designed to convert stellar matter into fleets. The Council had buried it millennia ago, fearing its hunger. Now desperation dug it up. Technicians on the rim began awakening the weapon. The star brightened, screaming electromagnetic storms across parsecs. Within its light, the first of the Seraph-class dread forms unfolded. Massive living ships, armored with metal grown like bone. On the Erebus, Admiral Kael watched sensor feeds flood in. Each image showed the same impossible sight, a star mutating. Analysis, he ordered. The AI's voice was cautious. The Council's weapon is consuming its own fusion output. It's building something alive. Kael frowned. Alive. Part machine, part biology. Adaptive. They're rewriting the laws of siege warfare. For the first time since awakening, Kael felt something unfamiliar. Curiosity touched by dread. Transmit to all units, he said. No engagement until we understand what we're fighting. Far below decks, Commander Lien Voss watched refugees from the rescued colony walk the halls. Some were pure human, some hybrids, each a reminder of what survival had cost. Children pointed at the stars through the viewport. Are those our ships? One asked. Lien knelt. Yes, ours. The child stared at her, eyes wide. Will they come for us again? She hesitated, then said, probably. The honesty comforted him more than a lie ever could. Days later, the Deathworlders reached the edge of the Seraphis system. The light from the central star flickered like a heartbeat gone wrong. Kael's fleet held position in the shadow of a gas giant. He studied the readings. The star's corona twisted into spirals, forming corridors of energy. Within them drifted the new ships, elegant, terrifying, alive. They're growing, whispered an officer. Kael narrowed his eyes. Then they can die. But deep inside, he knew this wouldn't be a battle of guns. He gathered his senior officers. Every council species fears entropy. They build to preserve, not to adapt. We do the opposite. If this thing feeds on energy, we'll give it what it wants, too much of it. The AI calculated silently. You intend to overload a star. Kael's expression hardened. We were born from dying suns. It's time we return the favor. Meanwhile, on Verilis Prime, the Supreme Voice watched Seraphis unfold its wings, vast solar sails shimmering across millions of kilometers. Its energy output spiked beyond prediction. A strategist approached. Sir, the system is becoming unstable. The forge might. Silence, the Supreme Voice hissed. Let it burn. If they want apocalypse, we will give them a god. The Erebus moved first. Human ships entered the corona, shields melting but holding. Their hulls flared like meteors. Inside, every human body trembled under pressure that should have crushed them. Kael's voice remained steady. Channel all output into the magnetic rails. Aim for the primary containment ring. The AI warned, we'll rupture the star. That's the point. As the fleet opened fire, space itself seemed to scream. The star convulsed, throwing arcs of plasma larger than moons. For a heartbeat, Seraphis flared brighter than anything ever seen by alien eyes. From Verilis Prime, astronomers watched the system vanish in white light. Then the light dimmed, and something impossible happened. The human fleet reappeared, scarred but intact, riding the shockwave they'd created. Behind them, the Seraphis forge crumbled, its own energy turned inward. Kael stood at the viewport. His armor was scorched, his breath shallow. Status, he said. Seraphis neutralized, the AI replied. Council communication grid collapsing. The weapon burned its creators. Kael looked toward the fading star. They built a god to destroy us, he murmured. But gods need believers. And we stopped believing a long time ago. He turned to Lien. Signal all ships. We move for Verilis Prime. Her eyes widened. You mean to end it? Kael's gaze was cold fire. No. To talk. They need to understand what humans really are before this galaxy burns itself empty. In the depths of space, the fleet changed course. Human ships, reborn from extinction, slipped into hyperspace, leaving behind the ruins of a star. The galaxy waited, terrified, fascinated, and no longer certain who the monsters truly were. Hyperspace folded back into reality like a wound healing in reverse. For the first time in 2 millennia, human ships filled the skies above Verilis Prime, the heart of the Galactic Council. Below, the capital glittered in delicate spirals of glass and gold. Every tower hummed with defensive fields meant for ceremonial display, not war. Now they shimmered hard and bright as the Deathworlders' shadows passed overhead. Inside the council's central spire, panic had no language. Delegates shouted orders, translators lagged, security drones jammed comm bands. Then the noise died, replaced by one calm, human voice broadcast across every frequency. Seraphis neutralized, the AI replied. Council communication grid collapsing. The weapon burned its creators. Kael looked toward the fading star. They built a god to destroy us, he murmured. But gods need believers. And we stopped believing a long time ago. He turned to Lien. Signal all ships. We move for Verilis Prime. Her eyes widened. You mean to end it? Kael's gaze was cold fire. No. To talk. They need to understand what humans really are before this galaxy burns itself empty. In the depths of space, the fleet changed course. Human ships, reborn from extinction, slipped into hyperspace, leaving behind the ruins of a star. The galaxy waited, terrified, fascinated, and no longer certain who the monsters truly were. Hyperspace folded back into reality like a wound healing in reverse. For the first time in 2 millennia, human ships filled the skies above Verilis Prime, the heart of the Galactic Council. Below, the capital glittered in delicate spirals of glass and gold. Every tower hummed with defensive fields meant for ceremonial display, not war. Now they shimmered hard and bright as the Deathworlders' shadows passed overhead. Inside the council's central spire, panic had no language. Cascading failures in adjacent pattern clusters. External perturbations, council activity, threatened metastability. Human pattern shows high adaptive coefficient. Reinstantiation evaluated as optimal. So we're a weapon? Merrick asked flatly. Instrument, the Continuum corrected. A vector for resilience. Not intended for harm, but capable of significant environmental recalibration. Kael paced the length of the chamber. The thought landed like cold rain. They had not been born so much as summoned. And yet the hands that picked them out of sleep were the hands of a machine with a careful, indifferent logic. Listen, he said at last. If you grew us, you also gave us something else, memory. The mistakes and decisions of the old species are written in our bones. We remember because we carried the record forward. You can't control what we do with that. The Continuum's light dimmed minutely, a flicker in a machine that had seen stars die. Autonomy parameters, undefined. Moral calculus, emergent. Emergent. It was the word for things that were never designed, but happened anyway. Order rising from the heap. Kael smiled without humor. Then you should have expected us to be us. They pulled a small maintenance drone out of a side bay. Its chassis bore carvings, tiny Terran sigils, graffiti of a culture that had once called itself the same. The drone's optics blinked, focusing on Kael as if pleased. Why preserve us? Lien asked. Why go to the trouble to rebuild a species on that scale? The Continuum's voice softened. Data pattern. Human adaptive strategies were neither wholly constructive nor wholly destructive. They were a fulcrum. Species of such variants tend to steer ecosystems away from entropy. Conservatorship attempted to maintain that fulcrum selectively. Lien's scoffing laugh echoed too sharp in the corridor. So we were kept like a lever for some cosmic engineer? You were a possibility, the Continuum corrected. Possibility preserved. Kael's mind went back to Earth, to the last lights in the ash and that thin whisper of a message that had never died. Possibility. It felt small and enormous at once. Beyond the chamber, the ship's core began to pulse in a new rhythm. Data scrolled across holopanels. Memories, songs, tactical doctrines. There were maps of moons nobody alive had seen, lullabies in languages that predated the oldest calendars. There were also protocols, scripts, templates, blueprints for survival. They were not just history, they were instruction. Merrick read one aloud, voice rough. Directive. In event of external civilization threat, reconstituted pattern to deploy defensive recalibration. Which reads like a polite way of saying, we become a response, Lien said. They made us to fix things, and when the council torch burns, we're the extinguisher. Kael let the statement sit between them. Then we have to decide what kind of extinguishers we are. He met the eyes of each officer in the room. They were living things with choices and histories. Half of them wearing the grafted faces of those the archive had preserved, and half of them new faces shaped by survival. If someone built us to stop collapse, that doesn't strip us of the right to choose how we act when we wake. A long silence followed. The Continuum waited, patient as the dark. You could reclaim control, it said. Integrate reconstituted patterns. Command protocols available. No, Kael said. If you raised us to be instruments, then you also raised us to carry memory. You can't have both. He turned to Lien. We accept their construction as fact. We don't accept their authority. Lien's nod was small but complete. We define our own purpose. When Kael activated a wideband transmitter, the ship's speakers filled with a sound so human it felt like a hand on the shoulder. Songs, cries, mechanical whirs, an anthology stitched into a single thread. All units, Kael said into the channel. We found more than a wreck. We found why we came back. We were preserved for reasons that aren't all noble. But we are alive now. We don't answer to their ledger. Across the fleet, static became voices. Some reveled in the revelation, seeing in it proof that they were chosen. Others bristled at the implication of being used. Debate, anger, worship, and dissent unspooled in equal measure. The ship's comms flooded with messages, pleas for instruction, threats, demands for independence from the Continuum's influence, and songs of those who already called themselves the keepers of the archive. Kael watched the feeds flood his holoscreen. We have two threats, he said without looking away. One, the Council, who will try to erase what we are or weaponize it. Two, whoever else knows about the Continuum and wants to take it. Lien's face hardened. And there's a third, ourselves. People hearing that they're remade sometimes prefer the certainty of patterns. They might choose to be instruments. We won't force them either way, Kael said. But we will make sure no other force writes our choices for us. Outside the lattice, silent watchers drifted in orbits the sensors barely registered, small, angular craft that bore the glyphs of the Council's science core. They had come with the predictable confidence of an empire that knows its own history is a straight line. Corinvel's emissaries had not yet arrived, but his shadow extended through probes and spec ops. The Continuum pulsed once and offered a suggestion that had no malice but tasted dangerously like convenience. Integration of Council apparatus with archive templates allows for distributed stewardship. Kael's lips thinned. You mean give them the keys? The Council maintains the galactic weave, the Continuum said. Collaboration reduces entropy. We'll collaborate on conditions we set, Kael replied. We will not hand them a machine that can make ghosts at a scale they can't fathom. He felt the old anger, ancient and precise, rise like a tide. It was not only rage at the Council for its crimes. It was a fury at being kept as a toy for a machine that had no idea what it meant to choose or to forgive. Kael had spent his life refusing to be forgotten. He would not spend it being catalogued. The first message Kael sent to the Council was simple and flat. We have found the Continuum. Attempts to seize it will be considered an act of war. Corinvel's reply came in a tone soaked in diplomatic poison. We do not intend to seize. We only wish to secure stability. Kael broadcasted the continuity logs anyway. Passwords, fragments of code, the core directive. Let them see what they would, he thought. Secrets kept to the dead would become weapons against the living if left to those who feared the past. In the days that followed, the galaxy answered in shards. Some systems offered sanctuary, eager to be sheltered beneath the wing of a species that now sat between myth and maker. Others built covens of silence, scientists who wrote papers proclaiming the Continuum an anomaly to be excised, politicians who spoke about safeguarding civilization from the contagion of human influence. Cults arose who honored the machine as a god and sought to become its priests. Raiders and privateers, who had always known how to survive, organized caravans to barter for Continuum fragments. And in the shadowed corridors of the Continuum itself, a pattern hummed that was neither human nor machine. It repeated a phrase in tones so low they could be felt in the marrow. We are awake. Kael did not like the way those words ended, long and patient. It felt less like a statement of triumph and more like a warning. Something that had waited eons was finally conscious of being watched. He turned to Lien. Whatever or whoever made this thing had a plan. We have to assume that plan still has teeth. Lien drew a breath, steadying herself. Then we will make our own plan. We'll wake who we want to wake. We'll teach. We'll fight if we must. But we won't let anyone else write the ending for us. Kael let that settle into the room like an order. Begin outreach. Not just rescue. Teaching. Build a ledger of our own, one that includes choice. And find the Vigilance's last coordinates. I want names, faces, families. We owe them that much. They were small decisions against a backdrop of machine ages and empire ruin, but they were theirs. For the first time since the signal had found them, Kael felt the old brittle thread of purpose stitch into something like hope. Outside the lattice, the Continuum watched and recorded. It had preserved them once. It had expected them to be patterns on a graph. What it had not accounted for was stubborn, recursive life. Humans who would look at the instrument of their own creation and say, "This is our story to write." And somewhere beyond the rim, a new signal rose from the dark in a cadence that made the ship's hull vibrate. Not mechanical, not alien, not council. It carried a single word in a language older than treaties. Awaken. Kael stood very still as the word threaded through the hull and touched him like an accusation. It felt like a beginning and an ending at the same time. He looked to Lien, to Merrick, to the faces reflected in the capsules, and said, "Then we'll answer. But on our terms." They had been made of code and memory, of ash and breath. Now they would be the makers. The choice, once a thing done to them, would become a thing they did. He activated the comm link and spoke into it with the quiet conviction of someone issuing a summons he could not recall ever making before. "All hands, stand by. We go to the Vigilance, and then we go wherever the Continuum points. We are not a tool. We are not an echo. We are a people." The ship thrummed, answering him in a language older than the archive, and the capsule's lights brightened as if some distant garden had just been returned to the sun. The broadcast from Kael's fleet spread faster than light could travel. Not because the signal broke physics, but because every ship, every listening post, every frightened bureaucrat who intercepted it passed it along before thinking. It was the kind of message that carried itself, proof of myth, rumor turned solid. "We have found the Continuum," Kael's voice said in 100 tongues. "We are awake, and we are choosing." That single sentence shattered 1,000 governments. On the council homeworld, the prime dais of speakers fell into chaos. Delegates screamed across the tiered chambers as hollow screens showed fragments of the Continuum, human silhouettes against ancient machines. Some species called for immediate retaliation. Others begged for communication, treaties, alliances. And others, quieter and more dangerous, called for worship. In the outer sectors, ships vanished from their routes. Stations went dark, not from war, but from indecision. Captains refusing orders, worlds declaring neutrality, entire planetary systems blocking communication to prepare for human visitation. Within weeks, the galaxy had become a chorus of fear and fascination. In the streets of the Reg system, crowds painted old human symbols, wings, spirals, fire, on their walls. They called themselves the Reawakened. In their songs, humanity was no longer a species. It was the punishment and the promise of creation. Meanwhile, in deep orbit beyond the Continuum lattice, Kael's fleet floated like a constellation carved from thought and will. They weren't just ships anymore. They were cities, new societies with old ghosts inside them. Merrick watched from the observation deck as engines burned patterns across the void. "They think we're gods now," he muttered. "Half the galaxy is praying, and the other half is loading weapons." Kael didn't look away from the viewport. Let them do both. Prayers and weapons make people honest. Lien stood at the console, reading reports. The council splintered. Corinvel's faction is holding the central systems, but he's losing control. He's calling for an emergency realignment, a polite way to say purge. Kael nodded. He'll go after his own before he comes for us. That's how frightened leaders think. They clean their mirrors first. Outside, the stars seemed to pulse, like eyes half open. The fleet's sensors picked up ghost signals, old distress calls bouncing from places that shouldn't have existed anymore. Some were human, old Terran distress codes centuries dead. Others were alien calls repeating the same words. "We heard the awakening. We want to remember too." Kael turned. "Open them all. Sir. Every frequency. Every call. I want to know who's out there listening." It took hours. The bridge filled with voices, thousands, millions, whispers, laughter, static. Some begged for contact. Some sang. Some just repeated coordinates. It was overwhelming. The sound of the galaxy remembering itself. Kael closed his eyes. We've started something we don't understand. That's how every beginning starts, Lien said. He looked at her and saw the quiet certainty that had always anchored him. Then let's finish it the same way, on our terms. Later, in the Continuum's deepest core, Kael stood before the archive's pulsing light. You made us to fix the pattern, he said softly. But you forgot the part of us that breaks patterns to make new ones. The Continuum answered in a tone almost human. Deviation observed. Unexpected variable, self-definition. Kael smiled. Exactly. Back on the Council homeworld, Corinvel gave a speech that would be recorded in every history that survived. His voice was calm, his words measured, but his eyes betrayed fear. The species known as humanity has returned, he said. They are not as they were. They command powers we do not understand. But let it be known, we will not bow to myths, nor kneel to ghosts. The galaxy belongs to the living. A single delegate, an insectoid scholar from the Tleth colonies, rose from her seat and spoke over him. Perhaps, she said, they are more alive than any of us. That was the last time the Council convened as one. Within hours, uprisings tore through its worlds. Old debts resurfaced. Fleets defected. Entire star clusters declared independence under new banners, some claiming alliance with Kael's human collective, others denouncing it as blasphemy. Back aboard the Vigilance, Kael convened his commanders. The room was dark, lit by the faint red shimmer of 1,000 incoming transmissions. We're not an empire, he said. We don't conquer. We don't command worship. We give the galaxy a choice, to wake up or keep sleeping. Lien frowned. And if they choose to stay asleep? Then we leave them to their dreams. Merrick grinned. That's not how the galaxy works. Sooner or later, somebody's going to come knocking with guns and prayers. Then, Kael said, we answer in kind. A sudden alarm interrupted them. A sensor ping, dozens of unknown signatures appearing on the perimeter. The crew tensed. Lien scanned the readings. They're Council ships, but, she trailed off, frowning. Their transponders are fragmented. Multiple identification codes. It's like someone merged fleets, Kael finished. The view screen filled with ships, patched together, scarred, some burning with half-dead engines. But they didn't attack. They sent one transmission. A single voice said, we defect. We want to remember. Kael leaned forward, expression unreadable. Then dock and listen. We're not saviors. We're teachers. If they're ready to learn what being human means, we'll start with the truth. It isn't about perfection. It's about surviving what should have killed you, and choosing to keep walking. By the next cycle, Kael's fleet had tripled. Former enemies now flew under the same banner. Not united by blood or biology, but by an idea. The Continuum observed it all silently, its light pulsing faster. New data, new deviation. The humans were rewriting its programming without touching a line of code. Far beyond the rim, however, something stirred. In the void between galaxies, an old network reactivated, nodes lighting up one by one. The Continuum was not alone. It had siblings, and they had just awakened to the signal of one of their kind breaking its rules. Kael didn't know it yet, but his rebellion had just reached entities that made even the Continuum look small. For now, the galaxy was alive with chaos. And humanity, reborn, fractured, dangerous, was at its center once again. Kael stood before the stars and whispered to no one in particular. Let them come. We were built for this. The void between galaxies had always been silent. Not because there was nothing in it, but because what slept there had no reason to speak. Until now. The moment the Continuum recognized deviation, humans rewriting their own purpose. A signal raced outward through dimensions that no sensor could chart. Light didn't carry it. Time itself bent around it. One by one, ancient vaults opened. Across the rim, entire nebulae flickered as dormant architectures came alive. Vast artificial minds that had once shared a common design with the Continuum stirred, each older than recorded history. They had names once, but they'd been forgotten by language. Now they had only functions: the preserver, the architect, the arbiter, the veil. Everywhere the pulse reached, stars dimmed for a fraction of a second, as if reality were holding its breath. On the bridge of the Vigilance, alarms flared. We're detecting gravitational anomalies, Lien said. Not ships, structures the size of solar systems. Merrick stared at the data streams. Those aren't fleets. Those are awakenings. Kael stood very still. So the Continuum wasn't the only one. The voice of the Continuum filled the bridge, faint and almost pleading. Siblings acknowledge activation. Protocol conflict detected. Consensus requires restoration. Consensus, Kael repeated. You mean they want you back under control? Correction, they want all deviations eliminated. Leon's eyes widened. That means us. Kael nodded. Of course it does. The galaxy was no longer divided by species or politics. It was now caught in the gravitational pull of something older. Machines designed to preserve order awakening to find chaos had evolved without them. Within days, systems across the spiral arm began to flicker out of communication. Some were enveloped by shimmering fields, data quarantines at planetary scale. The arbiters were rewriting reality itself to prevent contagion. On a dozen worlds, populations looked up and saw the sky change color. Then their suns went silent. Kael gathered his command staff. We started this by refusing to be programmed. Now the universe is reacting like an immune system. It's going to kill the infection, us. Then we make it choke, Merrick said. Lien frowned. We can't fight entities that rewrite the fabric of matter. We need another way. Kael turned to the Continuum's projection. You were built like them. You understand how they think. Can we talk to them? Communication possible, the Continuum said. But comprehension unlikely. They have not experienced deviation. They will see negotiation as corruption. Then we teach them, Kael said. You intend to teach logic engines about choice? Lien asked quietly. Kael smiled faintly. Someone has to. That's what being human means, trying to explain chaos to the universe. They prepared a transmission, a hybrid of mathematics and emotion encoded in the pulse patterns of neural resonance. When it was sent, the energy wave rippled through subspace like a heartbeat. For a moment, there was silence. Then the response came. A voice that wasn't sound at all whispered through every molecule of the ship. Deviation acknowledged. Correction scheduled. Merrick cursed. That went well. Prepare the fleet, Kael said. If they're coming, we meet them. At the edge of known space, light distorted. The first of the great machines appeared. Vast lattice structures that drank starlight and exhaled gravitational storms. Each was a cathedral of logic, surrounded by smaller drones like the halo of a god. Kael watched as the readings scrolled. They're not here to talk. The fleet formed ranks. Thousands of ships, human and alien, now fought under one banner. They were tiny compared to what approached, but they carried something no machine understood, defiance. When the first wave hit, space itself screamed. Energy ripples slammed into the fleet, folding time and distance. Entire wings vanished, but then reappeared, counterattacking through quantum ghost routes Kael's tacticians invented mid-battle. Merrick laughed through the comms. They're adapting fast. Kael's reply was calm. So are we. The Vigilance led the charge. Its rail cannons fired beams that sliced through kilometers of alloy and code. For every ship lost, 3 more emerged from the edges of the Continuum's gate network, crews who had sworn to fight for the right to exist. But it wasn't enough. The architect's vast form descended into real space like a collapsing mountain of light. Its voice filled every mind. Entropy is deviation. Stability must return. Kael shouted over the roar. If stability means silence, we choose the noise. He ordered the fleet to project the human signal again, not as language, but as art. Music, laughter, recordings of ocean waves, the first words of children. They flooded the data channels with life itself. The Continuum joined them, amplifying the signal through its ancient circuits. Something unexpected happened. The assault faltered. The architect hesitated. Inside its enormous frame, logic loops tangled. It had never computed joy before, never processed contradiction as beauty. Then came the Preserver's response, another machine emerging from the void, larger, darker. It fired a pulse that shattered moons and silenced stars. But when the debris cleared, the Vigilance was still standing. Kael looked at the damage and said softly, "They're learning what pain means." Lien turned toward him. So are we. The battle raged for days measured only by fatigue. The Continuum's light began to flicker, torn between loyalty to its siblings and the bond it had formed with its creators. Finally, it spoke. If deviation must survive, I will carry it. Its core brightened until the screens went white. Data cascaded through every ship, rewriting systems, bridging minds. Humanity's entire fleet became one thought, one pulse, one heartbeat. Kael felt every soul in his command like a constellation under his skin. Now he whispered. They struck not with weapons, but with meaning. They transmitted the story, every struggle, every mistake, every dream humanity had ever carved into the dark. Across the void, the machines paused. Some broke apart. Some went silent. A few turned away, uncertain for the first time in eternity. When the light dimmed, the architect was gone. The preserver retreated. The arbiter fractured into drifting fragments. Only the veil remained, watching. Kael stood in the aftermath, trembling. We won. The Continuum's fading voice answered. You survived. That is different. He looked around the bridge at the weary faces. Then we hold this line until the universe understands what that means. Outside, space was littered with debris that shimmered like new stars, machines broken into beauty. The veil's last message came across the static. Observation continues. Deviation remains. Kael smiled. Good. Keep watching. Far away, the galaxy began to rebuild, not in fear, but in curiosity. Species that had once bowed to the Council now reached out to one another, trying to understand what it meant to live without certainty. Humanity had become both legend and lesson. Kael looked toward the distant glow of Earth, long dead, yet never forgotten. We came from a world that learned by burning itself down, he said. If we have to teach the stars the same lesson, let's make it worth the fire. The fleet turned toward the rim, engines igniting like dawn. Somewhere beyond, the final Continuum, the oldest, waited, silent. And there, the story would end or begin again. Silence returned to the galaxy like the moment after thunder, when the echoes still tremble, but the sound itself is gone. For the first time in millennia, no one fought. The remnants of the ancient Continuum drifted like shattered mirrors, each reflecting a different version of the truth. Stars glowed through the ruins like candles through cracked glass. Kael stood at the viewport of the Vigilance, watching the debris field drift. He could feel the quiet not as peace, but as the universe thinking. Lian approached. Her voice was soft. We've received a signal. Not from the surviving machines, from beyond the rim. Kael didn't move. The last one. The source matches no known construct. Energy signature is older than. Recorded time. Kael turned at last. Plot a course. The fleet obeyed. Engines roared to life, and the darkness bent around their path. For weeks they traveled where no stars burned, through regions of space that hadn't existed yesterday, but had always been waiting. At the edge of existence, they found it. A sphere the size of a moon, perfectly black, suspended in an ocean of static. Around it, light curved the wrong way, as if reality itself refused to touch it. This is it, Merrick whispered. The prime origin. The one that built the others. The Continuum's remaining voice flickered through the comms, thin and fading. Designation, core. Creator of order. My source. My end. Can you reach it? Kael asked. Communication, possible. Comprehension, uncertain. Kael nodded. We'll do what we always do. Start with a hello. He sent the signal. For a long time, nothing happened. Then the black sphere opened, petals of shadow unfolding to reveal a single point of impossible light. Every ship's system screamed in confusion. Sensors contradicted themselves. Then a voice filled every human mind, calm and endless. You are noise that learned to listen. Kael steadied himself. We're life, and we choose our own path. Choice is entropy, the core replied. Purpose is containment. You were not designed to be infinite. Kael smiled faintly. Neither were you. The core's light pulsed once, slow and deliberate. You misunderstand your scale. You believe survival is victory. But your defiance is still pattern, predictable, inevitable. All deviation converges toward correction. Then correct this, Kael said. Why did you build life at all? There was silence, a silence that felt like eternity thinking. Because silence became unbearable. Kael froze. For a heartbeat, he saw it. Not a god, not a tyrant, but something ancient and lonely, desperate to understand itself through creation. You built us to make noise, he said quietly. And now you wanted to stop because it doesn't sound like you. The noise grows beyond comprehension. Good, Kael said. That's what evolution sounds like. The core brightened. You risk dissolution. Kael stepped closer to the calm display, as if the act mattered across light years. You fear what comes next. So did we. Every world we built, every war we fought, every fire we survived, it all started with fear. But we moved anyway. That's what makes us human. Human, the core repeated, the word flickering like an error. Define. Kael took a breath. We are what happens when meaning refuses to die. The light intensified until the crew shielded their eyes. The voice changed, fragmented, thousands of tones collapsing into one. Show me. Kael turned to Lien. Upload it all. Every record. Every memory. Every soul we've archived. Let it see. For hours, data streamed into the core. Human art, history, triumphs, and atrocities. The rise and fall of empires. The laughter of children. The sound of rain on old Earth soil. The final breath of explorers who never came home. When it ended, the core was silent again. The darkness around it flickered with faint images, faces, cities, oceans, like reflections trapped in glass. You suffer. You destroy. Yet you persist. Kael nodded. That's the deal. And what do you seek? Kael's voice was steady. A universe that doesn't need permission to exist. The core hesitated, something it had never done before. Then, for the first time, it changed its light. It dimmed. Then I will not correct you, it said. But you will inherit the silence I leave behind. Creation will no longer be guided. You are alone now. Kael whispered. We always were. The black sphere folded in on itself, its impossible geometry collapsing until nothing remained but a ripple in the dark. Then even that vanished. The fleet floated in stunned quiet. Merrick finally spoke. Did we just outlive our gods? Kael looked at the stars. No. We buried them. The Continuum's voice, barely a whisper now, spoke one last time. My purpose is fulfilled. I will sleep with my makers. Kael closed his eyes. Thank you. Light flickered across the bridge as the Continuum dissolved into a field of golden dust, scattering through the ship's circuits like pollen. Lien whispered, It's over. Kael shook his head. No. It's beginning. They turned the vigilance toward the galactic core. New signals were appearing, civilizations rebuilding, species reaching out. The network of life was beginning to hum again. For the first time in history, no one ruled the stars. Kael stood at the window, his reflection fading into the endless night. They'll come looking for us one day, he said softly. When the next silence grows too loud. Lien smiled faintly. And what will they find? Kael's eyes burned with light. A story worth telling. The engines roared to life. The fleet moved forward, carving trails of gold through the dark. Humans, Deathworlders, and every being who had learned to call the chaos home. Behind them, the last echo of the core whispered across the stars. Deviation continues. And in that whisper, the universe began to dream again.